Yes, LGBTQ representation. If you clicked on this video, you most likely already know what that is, but it's basically when somebody is gay, bisexual, pansexual, transgender, or anything under that umbrella. In recent years, it has become much more common for someone to be in the LGBTQ community, and it has been represented a lot in many forms of media, whether that be shows and movies, games, books, etc. And as we're going to talk about today, Five Nights at Freddy's might in fact have LGBT representation within its franchise. A huge portion of the FNAF community are in the LGBTQ community, so whenever the series has any type of representation for it, the community usually gets excited, and I don't blame them at all, as it is pretty exciting to feel validated and represented by your favorite media. In this video, I'm going to go over various cases of Five Nights at Freddy's having LGBT represented in it. We're going to be covering representations of both old and new. Before we begin, I must state two things. Thing number one, some of these are pure speculation, and I will discuss the other possibilities of such examples when talking about it. Thing number two, and this is going to be obvious, homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of bigotry are not going to be tolerated in the comment section or other areas of discussion. It's okay to think that Fronnie is just the two being best friends due to evidence within the games and etc. what have you, but if your reasoning is because of your own self-bigotry and hate, then that's not wanted here. I'm not sorry. With that out of the way, I think we should get started with a topic I'm going to have a lot of fun discussing today. For the first example I'm going to discuss the oldest form of LGBTQ representation in the FNAF series, that being the likes of Mangle and Funtime Foxy. Both are pink and white variations of Foxy. Mangle made their first debut in the FNAF series with Five Nights at Freddy's 2, as the character who's a take apart and put back together attraction for the children that go to the pizzeria. She stays in Kids Cove, and Funtime Foxy, the one we're familiar with, making their series debut in Five Nights at Freddy's sister location as the Funtime variation of Foxy, who serves as an entertainer just like the other Funtime animatronics, and they mostly remain in Funtime Auditorium throughout a decent portion of the game. Now I said the one we're familiar with, quote unquote, because of Adventure Funtime Foxy from FNAF World, but that is said to be the fixed version of Mangle, so it is technically Mangle, so in this discussion that's what they're going to be seen as. Now, Mangle and Funtime Foxy are both fan favorite characters. They both have fans who adore the hell out of them, and they can be seen as choices for someone's favorite FNAF character. Mangle is personally one of mine, whether that be from design perspective, to lore perspective, to concept perspective, to gameplay perspective. There's a decent amount of these characters. However, what is considered by far to the community the most interesting aspect of these two characters that gets people talking about them is, well, their genders. The gender identities for Mangle and Funtime Foxy have both been endlessly debated on by fans for years, and are a few of the only instances where Scott Cawthon is on board with a debate regarding LGBTQ representation in Five Nights at Freddy's. Starting with Mangle, throughout FNAF 2, there is evidence that Mangle is a female, but at the same time, there's evidence to suggest that Mangle is a male. For those who claim Mangle is a female, the evidence comes in Custom Night, where Mangle is activated in the challenge Ladies Night, along with Withered Chica and Toy Chica activated. There's also Withered Foxy, but that is due to how for every Custom Night challenge, both him and the puppet are defaults to any Custom Night challenge, just so the player isn't just sitting there with nothing to do. Therefore, Withered Foxy is not accounted for in the challenge. It is similar to the Double Trouble Custom Night challenge with Toy Bonnie and Withered Bonnie, whereas the two Bonnies, meaning double, so it's double the trouble, playing on the phrase with the challenge that it's named after. But Withered Foxy is still in it, so he's just not accounted for. Mangle for Ladies Night is, so this could serve as proof Mangle is a female. There's also the fact that Mangle goes under a pink and white color scheme, which while I've seen guys love the colors pink and white, I, somebody who identifies as gender neutral, personally love pink. Pink and white, especially pink, are colors that most people associate with females. And since this is a pizzeria location designed for children, simplicity is definitely going to be a factor when designing the pizzeria and its animatronics, so children can easily understand things more. So Mangle's colors being colors that a lot of people, even children, see as quote-unquote girl colors can imply that Mangle was designed with the intent of being a female. However, there is also evidence to suggest that Mangle could also be a male. The biggest piece of evidence is that on night 3, in the phone call, Phone Guy refers to Mangle as he and him pronouns.
They tried to remake Foxy, you know? They thought the first one was too scary, so they redesigned him to be more kid-friendly and put him in Kids Cove to keep the toddlers entertained, you know. But kids these days just can't keep their hands to themselves. The staff literally had to put Foxy back together at the end of every shift. Eventually, they just stopped trying and left him as some kind of take apart, put back together attraction. Now he's just a mess of parts. I think the employees refer to him as just the Mangle.
You could also argue how Mangle is a guy because of the fact they wear a bow tie, which is a piece of clothing attire most found in men. There's also how the other toy animatronics from FNAF 2 kept their genders from their original counterparts, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. So one could say, why not Mangle/Foxy? That's the evidence for both sides of the Mangle gender debate, but in September of 2015, Scott Cawthon was asked on the Steam forums by Reddit moderator Superstew about Mangle's gender. Scott Cawthon would reply that Mangle is a quote-unquote yes. Now this could be seen as just a simple troll, which was probably the main intention, but I feel like it's also somewhat a confirmation that Mangle identifies as both or doesn't have a gender. Basically, Mangle could be either non-binary, gender fluid, gender neutral, or anything of that sort. All are gender identities that fall under the LGBTQ umbrella. I feel like this is even more proven with how Mangle's voice is portrayed in Ultimate Custom Night, where Mangle, at least to me, seems to have a gender neutral-esque voice.
Be afraid. Soon you will look just like me. Beautiful.
If that's the case, Mangle may as well be an example of some of the earliest LGBTQ representation in the Five Nights at Freddy's series. Even if it's all a troll, it definitely seems like Mangle is either non-binary, gender neutral, or gender fluid. Which one of the three? Well, that's another debate that I personally don't want to delve into. However, Mangle may not be the only character under that guise. We still have Funtime Foxy to talk about. Funtime Foxy's gender is another debate among fans too, for how, just like Mangle, there's evidence to suggest both male and female as the gender identities for Funtime Foxy. For evidence of male, Funtime Foxy is referred to by male pronouns in his mechanic description for Sister Location's Custom Night. Another form of evidence could be how in Ultimate Custom Night, Funtime Foxy's voice seems very masculine.
A performance was demanded of me, and now I have delivered! Encore!
There's also the use of male attire, like a bow tie again. Now, in terms of female evidence, Funtime Foxy is active in the Girls' Night Custom Night Challenge in Sister Location, alongside Laura, Bonnet, Biddy Bab, Mean Arena 1, and Mean Arena 2. There's of course the pink and white color scheme, which I've already explained. Funtime Foxy's gender, to be fair, is not as debated as Mangle's gender, so there isn't a lot of evidence for either side of the coin. However, it is extremely possible that Funtime Foxy can identify as non-binary, gender fluid, or gender neutral, similar to Mangle, since if this debate is somewhat going on with Funtime Foxy like how there is with Mangle, it could be a similar answer. Funtime Foxy could be a yes. Regardless, these two characters' genders remain as consistent debates in the community, but some people, even myself, argue that there is LGBTQ representation to be found with these two. It's worth mentioning as well that in the Freddy Files books that detail about the characters, the debates and mystery continue on as both male and female pronouns are used on Mangle, Funtime Foxy, and even their variations like Phantom Mangle and Lolbit. Pretty fun. The next form of LGBTQ representation in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise comes from the books, believe it or not, specifically from the Fazbear Fright story, Out of Stock. The protagonist, Oscar, has a classmate named Thad, and Thad has a sister. Thad's sister is said to be dating the assistant manager of the Emporium, which we later find out to be a woman named Tonya, basically meaning this is a lesbian relationship. Now, there is an argument to be made that Tonya is the assistant manager of the whole mall and not the Emporium, which is certainly possible. However, I also had a small thought that since they even mentioned any type of assistant manager at all, what are the chances that it's a completely different character? FNAF has done this type of thing before, to be fair, within the games, but in terms of the books, there doesn't usually seem to be a situation where they'll make mentions like that and they'll mean something completely different, especially since these stories within the books are meant to be somewhat more narrative driven than the individual FNAF games. I'm on the side that believes this to be a lesbian couple being represented via Thad's sister and Tonya, but I see the other side of the coin. So this is a point of discussion about how before Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help 1 and 2 released, Steel Studios publicly teased the character Mystic Hippo, who seemed to be a feminine version of Mr. Hippo, a character who debuted in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator as one of the mediocre melody animatronics you can buy from the catalog for your customizable pizzeria. People have gone to theorize that Mystic Hippo is Mr. Hippo who transitioned into a transgender woman. When Help 1 and 2 released, Mystic Hippo was a character who has a fortune-telling minigame within the lobby of the game. The minigame uses eye tracking from the headset of the player to guess the correct tarot cards, the eye tracking feature only being supported by PSVR 2, hence why the minigame is a PSVR 2 exclusive. I saw a comment on Reddit that basically brought up the point how Steelwool was most likely required to implement the eye tracking feature from PSVR 2 as an addition in the game by PlayStation to encourage more people to purchase the PSVR 2, but Steelwool didn't want to hide lore behind what is basically a paywall, so they just did this. Hence why Mystic Hippo comes across as a random small gameplay addition in the game, and there seems to be no lore implications with her. And due to this randomness of an addition, that's part of why I personally think that Mystic Hippo and Mr. Hippo are separate characters. If this truly was trans representation, I feel like there would be more hints within. As seen with Mangle and Funtime Foxy, and also as seen by another form of representation we'll get to next, there's evidence and details to build up the likeliness of it being a representation. I've seen arguments that it's possible that Mystic Hippo could be family to Mr. Hippo, like a sister or mother. I'm okay with that personally. But all around though, it doesn't really seem to be any form of representation and just seems to be a game inclusion to mark gameplay features off of a gameplay checklist. We carry on to the last point of discussion in this topic, which is also something that is heavily debated on in the community, despite this being semi-recent. This is in regards to whether or not Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie are a gay couple and are dating. Let's look at the evidence. The biggest piece of evidence is how in Security Breach Ruin, when you go into Glamrock Bonnie's room, there's a poster of Glamrock Freddy hanging on the wall which says, "You and me forever, love Freddy," which people have taken the love Freddy as an implication that it's more than just friends, as well as the forever. The next piece of evidence is from a rather relaxing video on Steelwool Studios' channel called Yule Log, which was uploaded Christmas Eve 2023, and it depicts a plushie Glamrock Chica on the far right, and on the far left, plushies of Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie almost cuddling with each other, it seems. Another piece of evidence is how it's been said allegedly that Glamrock Freddy is inspired by Freddie Mercury, which Mercury was actually bisexual, meaning that it's possible that Glamrock Freddy would have taken more inspiration from Mercury than one thought. Additionally, it is to be noted that a decent portion of the employees and staff at Steelwool Studios not only support LGBTQ, but are also part of the LGBTQ community themselves. Due to this, some may argue that they may have tried to add some representation within Ruin. Now, I think it's time to discuss the other side of the debater coin, that being that Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie are just best friends. People argue that they're just best friends because of how truly close a best friend bond can go. Glamrock Freddy misses Bonnie is evident in Security Breach, but friends can miss each other too. As well, going back to the poster, best friends can platonically love each other. I completely see the side that thinks these two are best friends and nothing more, and neither side is confirmed right now. They could be cute gays, or they could just be close friends with a tight bond with high respect and platonic love. However, I will say that I'm leaning towards the side that thinks that Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie are dating, for one huge reason. If people are debating this after the poster in Ruin, why would Steelwool continue teasing this in the Yule Log video? It's like Steelwool is trying to get a message across like how Scott used to when there were questions. That's what it reminds me of. You have these two plushies almost cuddling with each other. Why is this here if they're really just best friends, you know? And again, as I already stated, there's a decent portion of people at Steelwool Studios' staff who are part of the LGBTQ community, so it's even more possible this is some type of inclusion because they aren't afraid to be open about who they are. And honestly, to me, that's commendable. I'm proud of Steelwool. If you think Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie are just best friends, that is completely fine by me, as again, nothing is confirmed. I'm saying this because this debate in the community is becoming too much sometimes whenever the topic is brought up. It is true that some, not all, but some of the people who don't agree with this shit being canon is because of their own self-hatred and bigotry, which is not okay in my opinion. At the same time though, there are some people on that side that don't agree with this shit being canon that have their evidence that is game related only and etc, which I've touched on already, which those people should not be dismissed. Unless Steelwool confirms it, it is up to interpretation and nobody, both sides at the moment, are right or wrong. They could be gay or they could be best friends. Both are possible and I would be fine with one or the other. That is, to my knowledge, most of, if not all of the LGBTQ representation in Five Nights at Freddy's that is discussed among fans. FNAF is now at a point where human emotion and character is the forefront to a lot of its stories and narratives, both games and books, thanks to Sister Location if I had to pick a start of it all. Because of this, representation of this kind is certainly possible, and it is something that I would not mind seeing with this series, even if one could argue it already has it. Something else too is that a lot of fans of this franchise are also part of the LGBTQ community, which is pretty wholesome and cool all things considered. And if there is such representation within the series itself, I'm glad that fans of this series are being heard, or being represented. And the other thing too is the representation I talked about today. All seems to be positive too. No clear signs of homophobia or transphobia within any of these points of the series, which puts out a good message, especially to an impressionable younger audience that, let's be honest, make up a huge portion of FNAF's audience. It's glad to see that Stubble, as well as Olomix too, have been openly supportive of the community. Scott Cawthon, I know it's debatable what his opinions on the LGBTQ community are. I'm not going to get into that whole can of worms in this, as I think it doesn't add anything special to the conversation and would probably bring unnecessary turmoil to what is basically an essay meant to serve as an open discussion for something that is a hot topic among the FNAF community. At the end of the day, Five Nights at Freddy's is a pretty fucking cool series, regardless if it has representation or not, and that is something that I think both sides of either coins today can agree on.